사랑하는 아버님, 오늘 이 자리에 모인 선남 선녀로서 아버지께서 세우서 싸우니 영원하신 부부의 인을 맺기 위한 거룩한 식전 후에 당신의 무한한 사랑과 축복이 같이 하시옵소서. 영계와 육계가 주시하는 가운데 저희들은 역사적인 새로운 가정의 전통을 세우기 위하여 순환의 길을 거쳐오면서 이 길을 개척해 나왔습니다. 이는 당신의 창조 이상 가운데 본연에 타락하지 아니했던 선남 선녀를 중심 삼고 선한 자리에서 아담 해와가 하나님을 중심 삼고 하나님의 사랑에 의하여 참다운 축복의 한 날이 있었던 널 하나님을 중심 삼은 선의 부모여,
What is your name?
Kazu Watanabe, or Kazuaki Francisco Watanabe.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
What kind of blue?
All kinds of blue.
Have you read Bluettes by Maggie Nelson?
No.
I recommend that book. It's about falling in love with the color blue.
Okay.
Have you seen Blue by Derek Jarman?
Yes. Any more blue questions? The thing about the church is that it defines everything about you, or it can, and it did to me, so that I had no practical understanding of the world, and neither did my parents, and down to the very rudimentary, fundamental basics of knowing how to live, like how to manage a budget, how to pay taxes, how to live and survive in this world and contribute to it in any way. So my life purpose has always been defined by the church, which is basically absolute filial piety and duty to the Messiah and to my parents.
Hey, Will and David, what are you guys doing? Oh. Uh-huh. Watch for Harry. Watch for Harry.
The most significant event or moment that I can at least symbolically point to for that kind of break between old and new is probably my divorce, which was a marriage arranged through the church, and which lasted several years after already leaving the church ideologically or in any practical sense, except that I have this relationship that lasted only or existed only because of the church. So I felt like after that break, after we had split up, I was finally on my own as an adult, away from my parents in New York City with no ties to the church.
No. Say I'm
Butterfly. The butterfly kiss. The butterfly. The butterfly kiss. The butterfly kiss.
This is Yokaichi, and Omata is playing with his new sword that Hiroko-san gave him. He's so proud of it.
I had no practical sense of what I was supposed to do, and I didn't care. I was part of a holy mission, so to speak. They were outsiders. They were busy doing all these things that they thought that had value, which meant nothing ultimately.
Sure. I mean, just like silly, like I think there was a time when I was much younger when I sort of got a thrill out of like stealing things at convenience stores, like lipstick or stuff like that. My name is Abigail, or Abby Sayre. I guess it's hard to say. It was like a long process of leaving, but by the time I was probably 24, I was like out and not looking back.
Uh-huh. Got some dead basketballs. Damn, band's so good.
I moved to New York City in June of 2008. So, yeah, around that time I was going through a lot. I mean, I had graduated from college. I had started a program in graduate school to get my master's in childhood education. So I was going to school at night. I was working full time as a new teacher in the South Bronx. I was living on my own for the first time. And I was seriously questioning my spirituality. Even though I wasn't completely out yet, my world had I had been so expanded to the point where like the church became less and less necessary, and I could look at it more and more critically. So even in 2008, I was looking at it pretty critically. But I remember still going to church, like definitely still going to these big ceremonies at the Manhattan Center, and right across the street from Madison Square Garden. So, my family was definitely still in, and so they're still in to a certain degree. So I still, I still have to sort of manage those worlds too. Yeah, it was a crazy time.
Let's go.
My name is Mitchell Ildo Henkin. so many things bother me, but then the more I think about them, the less petty they seem. I honestly don't know when I left because it was such a slow process. I assume I left when I left New York, but I think bits and pieces of it are still stuck to the bottom of my shoes. It was faded by then. But it didn't make the feeling any less strong because it was faded. I was at the crossroads of, what do I believe? What do I believe? And I discovered that I found more comfort in nothing, in just the chaos and darkness of just the absence or the abyss of there's nothing there. I found more comfort and solace, and I felt more important and personally fulfilled of it's not all because of something, but it's because of me. It's because I matter as opposed to being assigned worth.
So, what is your name?
My name is Masami Anise Kubo,
Where are you from?
Seattle, Washington.
And where do you live now?
I live in Brooklyn, New York. Okay, let me just start that over. This doesn't sound like I'm moonlighting as an artist. I am a graphic designer and creative director. I'm also a fine artist in performance and visual media. We were just started being told that we were going to save the world, in those words verbatim. I think definitely that had a weird impact on me as a blessed child raised in this movement. The whole idea of being a blessed child is that you're born without original sin, and therefore we are creating this holy blood lineage, and that's why you don't want to marry or have sex outside of the church, is to keep that blood lineage pure, to create a new pure race. And with that is the expectation and the vision that we as this new race are going to kind of cleanse and lead the new world towards this perfected state where we're all going to heaven, this kind of heaven on earth.
There are a lot of expectations both on a daily, weekly, monthly, everyday life basis and on a grander sort of cosmic scale, right? So on the day-to-day basis, you might be expected to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and read spiritual books, and sort of read the words of Reverend Moon so you can live with them throughout the day. It would be an expectation that you would go to church every Sunday, that you would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning on Sundays and go through a ceremony of bowing down to this picture and reciting prayers. And, I was expected to go to summer camp and be a group leader and teach my younger brothers and sisters, the things that I knew, and to give testimony about my relationship with God and talk about that in front of rooms full of people. I was expected to remain a virgin until marriage. I was expected to have an arranged marriage, have children. It's definitely not a choice not to have children, which was another incredible bombshell revelation to me as a young woman. I was like, oh my God, this is a choice. I don't have to do that. It was pretty mind-blowing. And you're expected to do God's will and sort of restore the earth to its original glory before it was put asunder by Adam and Eve and all the,
It's the one when you know, you know. Oh.
of course, as I started leaving the church and had to figure out how to live on my own, it was like really like starting from a blank slate. And I didn't have parents that could give me guidance because they have no idea what the fuck. They were always, there's a degree of gullibility to allow yourself to be, I shouldn't say that. There's a degree of gullibility for them, which I think allowed them to be manipulated into this church, but which also allowed them to be exploited financially. They signed up for so many church pyramid schemes. They gave away so much money. So I had no idea how to practically live. Existentially, it was a complete void. It was a complete lack of understanding of myself or what I should be doing. I was always a little spacey, and didn't have concrete interests. I liked artistic things, but not in any concrete way. So it didn't lend themselves towards any career path necessarily. My father was an artist who painted paintings and sold them basically only to church members. So it's like a fake job, and that was my frame of reference for a career. I had a complete existential crisis of purpose of life. I didn't know what it was, and I, in many ways, still don't.
I don't think there was a specific moment when I left the church completely. It wasn't like, okay, yeah, I'm done, this is it moment. It wasn't like that at all. It was definitely a gradual and, for me, almost strategic and meticulous extraction. It became so important for me to decide for myself what I believed in. I think that's really what the questioning was about. I had just kind of, at first, I think it began with wanting to be as faithful as possible to the church. I think that's when my questioning began, actually. I realized that everything I was doing was because I was told to and raised to doing it, not because I believed in it or thought that it was the right thing to do. And I wanted to be the best unificationist possible. I wanted to be the best believer, and that meant investigating the teachings and the principles for myself so that I could be as authentic and sincere in my practices. And through that investigation and research and exploration, I just started to see a lot of obvious holes and gaps in the logic. That didn't stop me from wanting to believe. I don't think I ever wanted to, quote unquote, leave the church. I wanted to be in the church. I wanted so badly to believe. It just wasn't working. At a certain point, I just couldn't convince myself anymore. And I tried talking to tons of church leaders. I wanted to be convinced, but it just didn't work.
Let's see, what did I think as a true believer? I'm gonna be honest, it's hard. It's hard for me to even recall something like that because I don't believe any of that bullshit anymore. And so there's a part of you that's like, I almost don't remember. Probably something sad. Like I just remember feeling really, really sad a lot of the time. Whether you're sad about the fact that you've broken God's heart and you've sinned and you've done something so awful that it's caused pain, or whether you're sad that you feel like the church, I'm sure I felt at some time that the church wasn't living up to its ideals, so I was sad about that. And probably in time I was also just really deep, like, I don't know. I remember the last time that I really truly believed it when I got my heart completely broken. So I just remember feeling like I'm tired of feeling this way. But I definitely still believed at that point. So I just knew I was tired.
I would definitely say that I am spiritual and will always be spiritual. That's not something I necessarily resent, even if it feels a little bit out of my control. I think the hardest thing, I don't think none of my friends would look at me and say that I'm spiritual, actually. I'm pretty resistant to a lot of alternate religious practices or spiritual practices, like even yoga triggers me. So in that way, maybe it doesn't seem like I'm very spiritual, but I feel like I still have this intense spiritual relationship with like the universe or the cosmos in a way. More so sometimes cynically, I generally feel like my life is part of this big cosmic joke. That's something I can't escape, is still like there's some kind of universal voice that is dictating my life and my path and everything that's happening to me, and they're laughing at me, which is a bit paranoid.
It still like pops up in my head every once in a while, like just a constant emptiness that I'm still trying to find a place something to fill that God hole. Like, I found me, and me is great, and it is big, and a lot of the time it does feel fulfilling, but it's a process trying to find solace in the emptiness, and I do I built myself up, and what I do, I did because of me, and what I do for me, but it's weird having all the answers and then not.
Just don't want to
Well, Mark's Apple, the last time he came in, he said, oh, next time you come in, I'm going to take you out to dinner. Number 5, so many new people that they want to check out with the guys again. It's like I told Mark, I said, this company doesn't even acknowledge that. Kathleen, will just show you how that works.
Reverend Moon started his church in the 1950s in Korea, and then the doctrine of the church, as I was taught, is that my parents, were fallen people. They were not of a pure lineage, and that they had to, sort of atone for that by getting an arranged marriage and going through certain rites and rituals to cleanse themselves and start this new family, and that my sister and I were born because of all that sacrifice and because of the spiritual conditions they made and the things they chose to do by following Reverend Moon. My sister and I would be born different. We would be born special and sinless. And it's this very, that's the magical thinking of it. Like, I don't remember ever getting a better explanation than that. Like, that somehow magically my body can, I am different. I'm spiritually different than other people. That I certainly believed.
It's a lot of pressure. It's so much. What they believe is what my parents, they got blessed one another as strangers and had to go through this whole 3-day sex ritual. It's bizarre. Beating each other with bamboo, there's all this weird shit.
May his parents deserve to raise him up to the study of the law, to the nuptial canopy and good deeds. Let us say amen.
They believe they had to go through a lot of misery so my generation could be perfect and live happy lives.
Hey, lick that knife.
You can look at
Wendy, looking pretty good, Len. Don't make
Will, you want a candy? Yeah, this piece is for Will. Wait a sec. Oh, okay.
a panoramic view.
Well, get the knife out of there.
You're gonna get your. Okay, here. Do you want ice cream too?
You want me to put ice cream on the plate for him?
Sure. Perfect. You can.
We, as second generation, had to be perfect. We were the perfect generation. In their eyes, we were going to be the gods of the world. But with little g's. They did a lot of specifications. Gods with little g's, you know, like leaders. But still using the word God. Like, and they believed the world was going to be perfect by the year 2000. When it wasn't perfect by the year 2000, it was our fault, and we had to do a bunch of, like, conditions and stuff in order to, like, correct that, and then it was going to be perfect by another year, and it just kept on, you know. I don't know how they're able to keep doing that. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, you're not enough. You're a burden. Everything is your fault, and therefore you, like, deserve to be ashamed, and therefore, you know, the next thing I'm waiting for is, like, what's my punishment, and how can I indemnify these deeds that I regret or feel woeful about. And I think that's the hardest thing to live with, is I don't really have an outlet of self-punishment anymore. And that was a structure that the church had provided for me. Was anytime I felt terribly about myself or something, then it was really easy to kind of externalize those feelings in the form of some kind of indemnity condition, pretty masochistically. You know, it was both like a release and an escape from shame, but also it was a formula that I convinced myself was the only thing that could work. The only way to live with your quote-unquote mistakes is to then punish yourself for them.
I was expected to be perfect. It's like a perfect embodiment of God's feminine love, and like make a God-centered family where my husband and I believed in the Unification Church, and we have children and raise them in the church and raise them to marry each other. And that in the world, I guess you're expected, like, they want more members, they want more people to hear the divine principles. So I'm someone who's like burdened with teaching other humans about the way, you know? It's a lot. It's a lot to ask of a person.
I'm schizophrenic, and I've had quite a few trips where it was like I experienced feeling godly. I've experienced feeling enlightened and chosen, and I think because of the way I was raised within the church, a lot of it, they played off of each other, and also because of like the whole holiness and spiritually open bullshit, it's in some cases, you know, is like almost like some like my bits were fed, I guess. It was bizarre, like being, and I think that tied into a lot of my schizophrenic episodes as well. Like, if you're told you're going to be a god your whole life and you go a little bit crazy, you're going to think you're a god, I guess. Like, yeah, I don't know. The expectations were pretty crushing sometimes.
And therefore, the job of the second generation, I guess, is to go into the world and to stay pure, first of all, to maintain that clean, that sort of like clean lineage. Like, there's all this obsession with purity and like blood and It's really, really weird. And then our job was to sort of go out and form our own families and have arranged marriages with the approved pure partner and create more children and populate the earth with, God's people.
Tonight, the children have just experienced this in every possible fashion.
That's the thing, it was just daily life, but it was every moment of your life having to be the best person you can be. Otherwise, you're not just failing your family, you're failing the lineage of all mankind. Like, it was up to us to be the platforms that all civilizations stood upon. Yeah, I mean, I really need to see a therapist. Like, I think that's going to affect me forever.
They had both moved to New York for the same mobilization effort, which was a big rally at Madison Square Garden in the early 80s. I forget what the exact rally was, but there's a huge mobilization of members from all over the world. And so my father came from Japan, my mother came from Argentina, and then there was a matching and blessing ceremony in 83, and they both signed up. They were, I don't know how old, in their early 20s? I don't know how old my parents are. They were in the New Yorker Hotel in one of the ballrooms. Men were on one side, women were on another. Reverend Moon, with his divine insight, pointed to two people. They met. They had, half an hour to meet each other and decide if they want to go through with it or not. They decided they did, and they were married the next day.
How my parents met is no different than so many other BC parents. They, at some point were in New York for missionary work and fundraising, and then there was the matching that True Father did, and basically they got matched, and married all on the same day, so they didn't speak the same language. So I don't really know how that worked. I think it's probably for the better that they didn't speak the same language. And they got married at Madison Square Garden with the 2000 couple blessing in 1982.
The way my mom tells it, how she joined the church, she was going on this long spiritual quest. She was very lost. She was raised Presbyterian or something. She was trying to figure her stuff out. I believe at this point it was the early 70s, fresh out of college. And she said that she was locked between two faiths and she couldn't figure out which one she wanted, unificationism or Satanism. She says that they are two sides of the same coin in a sense of both of them, for her at least, are very centered around self. And self-perfection, and she went with the Moonies and never turned back. My dad, no clue. It's like trying to get water out of a rock with that guy. He is a man of many secrets.
Yeah.
can talk a little bit about it. There's still a lot of holes. There's still a lot of things I don't know from my parents' past. But I remember my mom was living in New York City when she was a young woman, very similar to me. And she got like a letter. She was taken to like Oklahoma. She technically joined in Oklahoma. She went to a workshop out there with a friend or something, friend of a friend. Heard the Divine Principle, felt really inspired by the lecture, or whatever, she heard, and was sort of open to it. And then from there on, I think she fully joined. I'm not sure if she went right back to New York or if she might have joined MFT. She might have started living in a van and like driving around selling things. And then, she was probably 24 when she joined.
You're on camera.
And my dad, I know less about his experience because I know he's from out west, he's from Colorado, and I think he joined in Los Angeles. I would venture to, or maybe the Bay Area in California, which was a really big, one of those big places where the movement was strong, where they were giving workshops and trying to recruit people. I'm pretty sure he joined out there, and I don't know exactly why. I know he left a very unhappy marriage. I know he was sort of in a position that I think a lot of people are in when they join something like that, which is that they're very vulnerable. They've been through some kind of trauma. They've experienced some kind of, maybe an awful event, or maybe they're just sad and broken, like a lot of human beings are.
Has anyone else in your family ever been blessed?
I have. My sister Ike. I have 3 sisters. But that's it. And the blessing had changed by the time I got blessed, and changed even more by the time my sister got blessed. So it wasn't Reverend Moon picking a man and woman within a room. Like I said, things had changed, rules had changed as we grew up and things went on.
It's like in the church being engaged. It's like your souls are now tied together. And then once you get blessed, which is like getting married, and then after that, for the first time, you can, physically touch a girl at all, really. Like, at least within my family, that's how it was. It was claustrophobic. I got matched, and I realized over the course of that matching, it's just like, I am terrified of this person. Like, I think I really like them. Like, I might even love them. I don't know. I shielded myself from feeling everything because I was not allowed to feel that before.
I was never formally matched, was not blessed. I definitely had a bunch of matching, like, courtships, meetings, hangouts, supervised hangouts, dates, I guess you'd call them. I don't know. I was pretty much against all of them. I didn't want to do them. My mom wanted me to fill out a profile for one of those matching conference get-togethers where moms get together and they put profiles of their kids on the walls and they try to match each other. I was just like, I don't want to do this. This is so demeaning in terms of having to define myself on a single sheet of paper. And some of the questions were literally like, how are you going to best serve your husband? And I just couldn't bring myself to answer those questions. But my mom went to it anyway, and she just had like a blank sheet of paper with my picture and my birthday on it. Shockingly, I got some, responses out of that. Another time, she had asked if I was, this family reached out and they're interested, and they're like, oh, their son's creative and so are you, so it could be a good matching. And I was like 17 and I was like, no, I'm definitely not ready and don't really want to do this.
No, never. I was never matched. I never went through the process of having my parents look for someone for me and arrange and match for me, no.
Did you experience a lot of pressure towards that from your parents or your community?
I felt more pressure from the community, I think, to go through with that than my parents. My parents were pretty patient with me. And I think to their credit, I grew up in a house where education was the expectation. It was expected that I would go to college and it was perfectly acceptable for me to do that first and to wait, for matters of matrimony and all these things. And I really think that is a huge deal. Not everyone got those opportunities. I know more other people were pushed into fundraising or to get married really, really young. I know people that were matched at like 18. So I never had that pressure necessarily from my parents, but they did hint. They were sort of like, let us know when you're ready to find your special someone. And I think I always had the feeling and the intuition that if I made that choice, if I went down that road, that I would kind of be sealing my fate and that I would be in too deep. So even while I was still in the church, I was sort of like, I don't know about that whole marriage thing. Like that, it always felt, I was like, I couldn't quite get myself there ever, I don't think.
Like, we would sit next to each other, and you guys probably don't see the shoulders up, but I was very tight into myself. Like, right now I'll describe, my hands are like between my knees, and my knees are together. Like that, all the time. I didn't know how to talk to this person. Like, I could talk to girls that were friends, fine, but there was like, just the implication that this could be something else was so overwhelming that I just collapsed into myself and I couldn't function around this person. And it was after, like, she broke it, or she made it so I would break it off. It was a really weird thing. I'm not going to get into that. But it was after that stopped working out that I think I had it. I realized that I was ruined.
Where's my partner? Go! 1, 2. Raise your hand. I'm gonna catch somebody. Who needs a partner? Quickly. False. Wait, there's another man missing. Where's the man? Come over here. Wait.
My older brother Levi and his wife Maggie were matched and blessed in the church. They picked each other. They went on a birthright trip to Israel on the same trip and fell in love. And then they told their parents, and the parents are like, yeah, sure, get married. And they got married within the church, and yeah, they're doing all right. They're about to have a baby. It's gonna be cool. And my younger sister Leanne got matched and blessed to her husband Jan, and they live in Norway. I don't think they're happy, but that might just be me projecting, because I don't think anybody in our family is capable of real happiness. We are trying to rebuild a relationship. We were all very close when we were really young children. It really became like a us versus... My dad is a very angry fella. So the kids, when we were younger, all banded together. We became very tight and very close, sort of like protecting each other.
Don't bring him back. He's only got half a haircut. Well, that's too bad. So, no wonder I've only got half a...
One by one, they all sort of disappeared. I don't think I ever really had a relationship with my youngest brother, Benjamin. When you're like an angsty fucking teenager and you have like a sibling who's just then like becoming a person, you're like, you don't want to have anything to do with it, and I sort of regret that now.
Here, you gotta keep
1,
it for...
2,
Here, keep it for all. Go on.
3.
Oh, God. No more. Oh, God. Oh, God. God. Oh.
I have 4 siblings. I'm the youngest of 4. I was kind of the first one to, or at least as far as I know, was the first one to really start questioning the church. And since then, I feel like my siblings have all kind of started to do their own personal questioning with their relationship and faith. And that's, manifested in different ways. And I feel like we're all on a different place in the spectrum of, hardcore believer to completely out of it. We are now able to have these kind of conversations, me and my siblings, but we weren't before, or at least I didn't feel like I could talk about these things until recently. I want to say like the past few years. And that's huge and monumental. I don't think I ever thought I would get to that point with my siblings. Some of them were so intensely devout that I just was like, this will never happen. And I think if I were to, like, if my high school teenage self were to see me now in my relationship with my parents and family, I don't think I would have believed it was possible.
We're all 2 years apart. I'm the oldest. I have a brother and 3 sisters. But I grew up with 2 sisters. My youngest sister was given away at birth for adoption in a church tradition called an offering child. She was an offering child. So my mother's best friend, who joined the church with her in Argentina, his wife couldn't have children. So my mother and father agreed to have a child and give it to them for adoption. So she grew up knowing that she has birth parents and her parents, and she takes their last name and everything. She calls them mom and dad. So it's a bit of a strange relationship, but when I grew up, I always say I had 2 sisters because that's who I grew up with. And then in the last few years, when people ask me how many siblings I say I have 4 others. I have 3 sisters because she is my sister. I just didn't grow up with her.
My closest relationship was always with my older brother Levi, but he sort of reformed himself so many times where it was just like he was super holy, and then he went on STF, and that's when he left the church, and he became an entirely different person, and it was just like I wasn't able to really keep up. And my younger sister Leanne moved out of the house when she was 15, apparently. I don't remember it, but that's what my siblings say. And my younger sister Mary, I was always close with her, but then, I don't know. She went to Korea, I went to boarding school in Reno, and then we're all just now being like, shit, we have like 10 lost years that we gotta make up.
July 99. There we go.
I don't know what it is, if it's the culture of the church or the culture of our particular family, if it's a Japanese thing. But we don't call each other on the phone to say I love you, or we'll text every now and then. I haven't seen my brother. I saw my brother this summer, but before then I hadn't seen him in 2 years.
Harry, what are you doing, huh?
For my sister, Christina, who grew up as an offering child away from us, she doesn't know that that's our family dynamic. So I think she may feel that we're cold or distant towards her, when in fact that's just how we relate to each other. And my feelings for her are the same as my other sisters, but it's just the expression of that feeling that's different from what she may be used to. So if I could say I'd want a different relationship with her, it's for her to know that that she means as much to me as my other sisters.
I don't know what birthday this was. We were watching The Perfect Storm. I didn't want A Perfect Storm, by the way, for my birthday, but my dad loves that movie, and he'll get it any chance he could get. And we were watching the movie, and my dad was really angry at my mom about how much she spent on the birthday, and they were having this big old argument. My brother is trying to watch the movie, Levi, big brother, and he tells my dad, kindly shut up. My dad just walks over and stomps on his chest, and he had trouble breathing for a while. My mom called the police. The police came. At that point, my mom was starting to take my dad's side, and then like the police kind of took my dad's side too. It was very much a, yeah, if my kid told me to shut up, I'd kick his ass too, sort of deal. And that was my birthday.
I feel like I've gained some degree of wisdom since leaving the church. I mean, I feel like some. This is maybe a strange way to put it, but I feel like I aged. I did a lot of things and went through a lot of experiences that people don't have to go through until they're mid-age, or maybe never, if they're so satisfied with their life and the circumstances and their ways of thinking. So I feel like I have a degree of wisdom, but also an extreme naivety, both existing within me at the same time. Not everyone can say they were married for 6 years and divorced before they were 30. You know what I mean? With that comes some level of wisdom, because when in your marriage, you have to step up a certain way, and you have to engage with another person in a very intense way that maybe you could have avoided all throughout your 20s when you're fucking around. But with that, the flip side of that is now in my late 20s, as a divorcee who's only had one relationship in his life, one romantic sexual relationship in his life, complete naivety and not knowing how anything works, in terms of dating, in terms of romantic love, in terms of sex. And I think through that specific example, I think many parts of my life can be explained in that way, which is I gained a certain understanding or perspective, or, wisdom sounds maybe like I'm saying too much, but of wisdom and lived experience that makes me feel older than people who are my age. And then the flip side of that is feeling much younger than people my age. And you have to reevaluate everything. Stuff that people take for granted in the outside world, from their parents or whatever. You, as someone whose a complete understanding of life has been erased, have to question everything. And I'm still struggling to find out what the point of any of this is. And you take it step by step, and I'm not a depressive person anymore, and I'm taking steps to figure things out little by little, but what was the question? So the place in the world is a work in progress.
There was no longer any room for me in that enterprise, in that community, in that church, in that ideology. I felt like I outgrew it. I thought, I can't be contained by this anymore. The world is too big a place. I had too many interests. You know, I was already definitely, became a feminist at college and was sort of introduced to other sort of ways of thinking about the world and thinking about like my place in it. So when I left, what do you leave behind? You do leave a community. I will say that. I don't have as much of a sense of community in my life because nothing is more motivating than having a group of people that think they're doing God's work. And that's a really powerful thing. And I think it's a really particularly powerful thing in America where we live far apart from each other and communities form still around like religious belief a lot. And again, like I said, that provides things to people. It provides you with community. It provides you with a sense, what people need other people. It provides you with a sense that you're loved and cared about. And so I definitely lost some of that. I definitely lost this sort of like thing that I could tap back into where people have known me since I was 5 years old, like adults in my life, that have helped raise me and experiences that I had with people. I chose to close the door on all that and I chose to remove myself. So that's a real loss. I also lost a lot of the shame and the fear and the feeling of never being good enough that accompanies trying to live up to really high expectations and standards that can feel crushing. So I've let go of a lot of that. And man, I've gained the whole fucking world. This is also what I say. I also tend to say, I wasn't push or running away from that. I was running towards life. I felt like I was going towards this wide, expansive world where it was pretty scary. Freedom is terrifying, right? It's scary to realize oh, I'm alone in the world. There is no God necessarily. The whole story, that whole sort of infrastructure that I had of the world, not true. It all sort of crumbles. What we are left with is that means I can make choices for right now for my life. I can make the life that I want, and it can be messy and beautiful and full of contradictions and not clean and not pure and there's no sort of utopia that I'm hoping for.
When quote unquote outsiders learned that I was raised in a new religious movement, a lot of them ask, was that hard? Was it hard being raised in a fundamentalist religious group? And then was it hard, where you are now? And I think my answer to that what I tell them is growing up in the religion in a way for me wasn't as hard as leaving it. I feel like a process of removing myself and trying to redefine who I am and extract myself from everything that I had ever known was a lot more painful than maybe whatever traumatic experiences that I had within the church. You're going against your nature in a way. It's so deeply nurtured and conditioned to you. There's only so much you can do, but a lot is possible. It's shocking how different you can change over a short amount of time. I don't think that there's no going back if, say, I wanted to go back to the church. I think at this point they're desperate for membership, but I think the biggest thing I've lost is a sense of belonging, definitely. I don't know that I can ever allow myself to feel kinship or a sense of belonging with any community or group of people ever again. Not because I don't want to, I want it so deeply, but it's just because I have an intense paranoia of those relationships and that acknowledgement. It's so important for me that I have a sense of ownership over my choices and my sense of self. For so long, the only way to do that meant sacrificing all trust in everyone and everything. No, I don't think I 100% gained ownership of myself at all. I think every day I'm finding out new things I just did not know about myself, and it's unnerving and unsettling and difficult, but I do feel like I've definitely gained a sense of choice, and I feel really fortunate to have ever had a sense of my own gut feelings of what's right and wrong. Those things have always been really clear to me, and I feel like it hasn't been as clear for other people, and I'm just lucky to have had any kind of intrinsic sense of righteousness to guide me towards some place that made me feel better with who I am.
I very much have a before and after. I have the before I left the church and after I left the church, and even people that I should be closer to now because they left as well. There's sometimes, like with some people, that a distance can be there. Walls were built, and it can be scary. Now I know myself. I am me. It's not centered around anything. The foundation isn't something outside of myself. I am my own foundation, and I know who I am as a person, rather than being told, you're second generation, your foundation is this is what you believe because this text says it. I believe what I believe because I found it and I believe in it.